the Wagner Group to support Hezbollah, an intelligence error or a chess game. The long-awaited Israeli ground offensive into the Gaza Strip started this week. Iran and its proxy allies of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels have stated that a ground invasion of Gaza was a red line in expanding its war against Israel and the United States. These statements by these Israeli enemies are not new and have been stated on a near ongoing basis since October 8th. And they've been growing louder ever since. There was an expected escalation this week when U.S. intelligence stated that the Wagner Group, a Russian mercenary group, was going to supply SA-22 anti-aircraft systems to Hezbollah. The Russian government denied this report, so at the current time it is not sure if it is true, or the Russian statement is disinformation, or this is another intelligence failure by the U.S. Mossad that failed to detect the October 7th attack. The Wagner Group is often classified as a mercenary group or a private military contractor made up of former Russian soldiers and paroled Russian prisoners. The labeling of the Wagner Group as a mercenary group is an incorrect classification of the group in that it is and other private contractors are technically not allowed under Russian law. These groups were officially absorbed this year into the Russian Defense Ministry and are now under the command of the Russian government. These groups, with the Wagner Group being the largest, do operate outside of Russia in various military missions in Belarus, Syria, Central African Republic, Libya, Mali, and Sudan. These missions, though established before the absorption of contractors in the Defense Ministry, have served Russian interests, though in a gray area of Russian intervention. The announcement by U.S. intelligence officials this week that the Wagner Group was in the process of supplying Hezbollah forces with medium-range SA-22 anti-aircraft batteries would be concerning for the U.S. and Israel. Israel has directly stated it would attack Lebanon if attacked by Hezbollah, and the U.S. has kept some strategic ambiguity by stating it would protect its allies and its assets if Hezbollah attacked. The fact that two U.S. carrier strike forces are operating in the eastern Mediterranean Sea and over 100 U.S. Air Force aircraft have reinforced the region, the U.S. has a credible air and naval striking force in the region. The U.S. has stated that no ground troops will be used, and the deployment of the aircraft carriers and the Air Force assets indicate the U.S. will rely on its edge in the air to attack, along with Israel relying on its Air Force to be its first strike option. So the introduction of SA-22 launchers would be a direct threat to the U.S. and Israeli air assets if they tried to attack Hezbollah. That means anti-aircraft suppression will have to be considered in any response from the air. The SA-22 has been used in Syria, and the Israelis have encountered them before in its air attacks in Syria, and they have not been particularly effective. It can be expected that it may change tactics. It will not change the strategic balance in the region because they will not be able to suppress air operations. The importance of the missiles and Wagner Group being the one to provide the assets is the escalating issue. As stated earlier, the Wagner Group is no longer independent and serves the Russian Defense Ministry. This is an indication that Russia is willing to escalate the war in the region and being on the side of Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. This is a destabilizing move and increases the likelihood of expanding the war. How will the U.S. handle if the Wagner Group shoots down an American plane? Or how will the Russians respond if the U.S. or Israelis kill Russians when they attack the SA-22 batteries? These are concerns about escalation. The U.S. has attacked the Wagner Group before in Syria and killed many Russians in 2018. That was at a time when Wagner was an independent contractor, so the Russians have latitude on how to respond since they did not work directly with the Russian armed forces. This time around, it would be different since Wagner is part of the Russian government. The question to be answered is why would Russia do and choose to potentially escalate the situation? Is it to give Iran and its proxies some protection against air attacks? Or is it a red line to convince the U.S. and Israel to pause escalating the war against Hezbollah? Is this a case of the Russians adopting a similar pattern policy in Lebanon and Syria as the U.S. has arranged in Ukraine against the Russians? Is it an attempt by the Biden administration to up the ante and press for more aid for Israel and Ukraine in the Congress, justifying that we need to contest the Russians in both the Middle East and Ukraine? Or is it intelligence trying to throw up a warning after its failures of October 7th? All of these questions are escalatory in nature except for another intelligence failure. The Biden administration wants to slow down the pace and ferocity of the Israeli response in Gaza, so trying to create a straw man over the SA-22 seems counter to U.S. policy to rein in Israel. The U.S. pressure on Israel is just as much a domestic political move to shore up Muslim support of the Democrats ahead of the 2024 election cycle as it is a foreign policy decision. This means that the Biden administration is internally divided between its Jewish support and its Muslim support, creating this mixed signal. Or the Russians are threatening escalation with a mirror of U.S.-Ukraine policy. Or is it an intelligence failure? Time will eventually give us this answer.